Is it time to pump the brakes a little bit on the Georgia hype train? That's my question today. Look, the Georgia Bulldogs, I think, are probably going. I think that this team is probably going to be the best team in the country. Again, I think it's been the best team in the country for the last 3 years, and that is kind of the easy answer for why there is so much hype around Georgia heading into 2024. Haven't had spring ball yet. I think that when spring rolls around, obviously, we'll maybe have some changing of opinions when you find out, hey, this guy's going to start over there. That's what this team's offense is looking like, all of that. But I think that the Ohio State hype didn't change anything. I don't think it changed the way that people really view who's the best team in the country this year. Pretty much everybody is saying that it's Georgia. Even a Greg McElroy, who went on a podcast recently and was discussing kind of a roster breakdown. Well, like position by position, there's not really a team that's more powerful than Ohio State. He still acknowledged what Georgia is heading into this year. But if you look at every single expert, almost all of them who have formed public opinions about this upcoming year have been pretty, they haven't been shy about saying that they think Georgia is the best. And it's evident in all the writing. It's evident in all the numbers. And I think that the belief and trust in Georgia right now is at an all-time high. I don't know if it's ever been higher than this. Ryan Curler from Dawg Post here, talking about Georgia and the hype around this Bulldog program right now, heading into the 2024 season. Real quick, the newsletter, I'm linking that down below. You want written content as well, and not just on YouTube? Well, our newsletter, we give that to you in your inbox every single afternoon. We give you the latest premium, free insider stories, all of that good stuff in your inbox. All you got to do is give us your email address in the link down below, and you'll get 5-star Dawg Post updates every single day about the Georgia Bulldogs. Shout out to EcoPoly as well. I'm recording this on Super Bowl Sunday. Super Bowl's a couple hours from now, so I'm itching to go get to my party. But I want to talk about the schedule for Georgia, the odds. Georgia's right now, according to FanDuel, plus 300 to win the national championship. After them, Ohio State plus 500, Texas plus 700, Oregon plus 1,000, Bama plus 1,200 still, LSU plus 1,300. So Ohio State does have that second. I knew that Ohio State and Texas would be top 3 or 4. Oregon. Alabama, the change at Alabama is part of why this hype has become what it is, because now Nick Saban's not around. He has been the biggest blockade for the Georgia Bulldogs. Just plain and simple. It's true. Now, Georgia did slay the beast one time, and that was in the national championship a couple of seasons ago. But outside of that, Alabama has prevented Georgia from winning 1, 2, 3-ish other possible national championships, definitely 2. So there is some truth to the fact that Alabama, in a way, was in Georgia's way. And now that that's gone, I think what we're going to see is that Georgia will be the perennial during the offseason. Well, you know what Kirby Smart's got. You know what Georgia's got. They're probably the best team in the country. Alabama was like that year in, year out, almost number 1 in odds. But I feel like the hype is especially greater around Georgia this offseason, even more so than 2 offseasons ago when Georgia had just been coming off of a national championship. Alabama was still number 1 in odds, even though Georgia was returning a starter, returning a lot of production from that national championship. Alabama was still up there and regarded as that team. You know, you had a returning Heisman Trophy winner in Bryce Young, so there is a little bit of an explanation to that. When you look into what this year is, with the transfer portal, I've seen some ridiculous takes. Oh, Georgia did a terrible job in the transfer portal because it lost so many players. It didn't lose that many players that were key contributors. And I think they only really lost 1 key contributor, really. 2 maybe, in Jamon Dumas-Johnson, if you want to call Marvin Jones Jr. a key contributor. But if we're being quite frank, his production was underwhelming for what his talent was. This Georgia team just brought in the number 1 class, and now you go look at everyone's list. Who has the best coach in college football? Georgia, with Kirby Smart. I haven't seen a single... I've seen plenty of lists since Nick Saban's retired, and I haven't seen a single one of them that doesn't have Kirby Smart ranked as the number one coach in college football, which adds to my point. Carson Beck, according to FanDuel, tied with Quinn Ewers for number one in odds to win the Heisman Trophy next season. You don't really see Georgia players get to that, right? Stetson Bennett is the closest thing that Georgia's had to a Heisman Trophy winner in the last 30 years, and he was pretty far from that, even though he became a finalist. Carson Beck, there was some momentum. Could he be a Heisman finalist this year during 2023? It doesn't work out that way in the last couple of weeks, so he doesn't get invited to that ceremony, and now he's like this overwhelming favorite, right? He's got the Lamborghini. Georgia's got this roster, and the fact that Georgia has the schedule it has. Look, I did a video a couple weeks ago where I broke down all of the contenders according to odds. Who has the toughest path? And I deemed, right, this is Ryan's math, I deemed that Georgia has the toughest path out of all the contenders. And I think that it speaks a lot about how people feel about Georgia knowing this schedule. Georgia's got to go play in Austin. They got to play Texas, at Ole Miss, at Alabama, at Kentucky, against Clemson, against Tennessee. You mix in rivalry games like Auburn and Florida into that. And Georgia's got, in my opinion, probably the most difficult road in college football this year. And especially so, even so, when you compare it to the other contenders. I know Oregon's got to play Ohio State. Texas has got to play Georgia. Alabama's got to deal with some sneaky teams like Missouri, in addition to the teams that they play every year like LSU. I think Michigan will take a step back. But out of the contenders, it seems like Georgia has the toughest path. And everyone's pointing to them as the probable champion, and the odds say so as well. ESPN released another article recently. I discussed this already, but I want to re-emphasize this point because it is part of my larger discussion right now about how high Georgia's hype is right now. 5 of their insiders, their college football analysts, writers, they put out a piece predicting what was going to happen in this first 12-team playoff, and all of them had Georgia not only making it with a bye, but being the number one seed. So everyone thinks that Georgia is going to enter the college football playoff as the number one overall team in college football. And is this the new default? This is my other question. Is this a new default? But I do find it a little bit striking that the hype is as much as it is compared to the last couple of years, when I think we knew more about Georgia's roster 2 seasons ago, heading into that 2022 season where they go 15-0. That was a roster that was proven. That was a roster that really wasn't missing that much. Obviously, lost a lot to the draft, but they had so much behind them that we knew. I don't feel as strongly about the 2024 Georgia roster is kind of my point. I think it's really, really good. I think it's one of the best in the country. I don't think it's as good as it was a couple of years ago, and that's just my take. Now, this is also relative to the rest of the country, and I think the transfer portal's really changed things because it makes teams look a lot different. Oregon's going to look a lot different than it did last year. Ohio State's going to look different with Will Howard, and Michigan's going to look different. Now, some of that is just progressing and people leaving, but the transfer portal has changed kind of immediate results and the immediacy of roster turnover, which is more so in college football than the NFL, just because people at the max, well, nowadays it's like 6 years, but at the max you can play 4 or 5 years in one place. So sometimes there's not as much roster turnover in professional sports, but in college sports there's a lot, and now it's even more so. Kirby Smart is the main reason, I think, for why Georgia is where it's at. That's not an I think, that's an I know. But it's an I think for this hype. Because now that it just seems like he's running the best program, right? At the end of 2023, when Georgia didn't make the playoff, they were, in my opinion, snubbed, and a lot of people's opinions snubbed. That was the whole point. Well, why isn't Georgia? They were the best team all year. They just lose to Alabama in this one game, and then they get knocked out of the top 4. Well, all of the experts pretty much thought Georgia was one of the 4 best teams. So I think that the hype is at an all-time high. I don't know that it's ever been like this before, where now the expectation is national championships. You got to ask, is the fan base spoiled? I think Georgia's fan base has given a lot to Georgia, but is it spoiled in a little bit of a way? It's going to become that if it hasn't already. because now the expectation is national championship or bust every single year. That's where Georgia's at. A little bit of a discussion about their hype and their odds that I just want to talk to you. Happy Super Bowl Sunday. This is going out on Monday morning, though.